Morning, everyone.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Roasting with the Ozone Project. For those of you who haven't joined one of these sessions before, the format is essentially someone from the roast team will sit down with one of the largest media owners in the UK to look back at recent ad tech developments and look ahead to the next 12 months and what's coming up on the horizon. We'll kind of stall for a couple of minutes, do some intros while people are still joining and logging on. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Matt Lyons, Display Director at Roast. As part of my role, I oversee planning and buying of digital display and mobile activity for a range of Roast clients. And as part of that role, obviously work with Joel and the Ozone team to bring client briefs to life in the digital display and video ecosystem. I guess just to contextualize this talk, it's the fourth digital roasting we've done. Previous sessions, we've had the likes of Google, Microsoft, Snap. So I think it's a real testament to the increasingly important role the Ozone Project play in the digital media ecosystem here in the UK, that we now put them in the same company as those global ad tech partners. And yeah, from the Ozone side, we also have Joel Woodage, agency hub lead. And Joel, I'll pass over to you to give a quick intro to your role at the Ozone team.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt, and thanks for the invite. Firstly, so I'm Joel here at the Ozone Project. I look after the independent agency patch. So working with Matt and the team, I've been here about 2.5 years now. So yeah, it's going well.
Brilliant. And I think, despite the impressive growth the Ozone Projects have seen in the past 2-3 years since they launched, I'm conscious there will be some people on joining the session today who probably don't have a complete understanding of the Ozone Project proposition. So I think it'd be fantastic, Joel, if you kick us off with a quick synopsis of who Ozone Projects are and also how you fit into that wider digital media ecosystem here in the UK.
Yeah, no, of course. So a good place to start. The Ozone Project is basically a partnership between some of the UK's leading publishers. We're essentially building or have built a digital ecosystem that's fundamentally based on a first-party ID approach or data set. As the industry as a whole kind of moves away from third-party cookies, we enable near universal reach of near enough all UK adults online across some of the most engaging and high attention digital environments. The platform itself enables buyers to understand the nation, which as of June is 45.1 million users, as they consume content across some of the most, across premium titles and enable buyers to engage those audiences based on their passions and interests. I suppose one of the kind of core principles of Ozone is connecting customers closer to publishers, ultimately making it easier to transact at scale. So we also have another kind of piece around brand safety, transparency, and then obviously privacy by design approach to digital advertising. It's actually a really interesting space at the moment. I suppose from where do we fit into the ecosystem? We very much see ourselves as a scaled alternative to the open web and monthly user volumes that are equivalent to the big tech brands. So yeah, it's quite interesting, and ultimately, what we're looking to do is complement the brand-led sell of our individual publishers.
Brilliant, and I think to that point on your publisher portfolio and those premium brands that includes, that's the most of the top news brands in the UK, and I suppose increasingly it's magazine-style publishers as well. It'd probably be great if you just touch on briefly some of those names who are included within that portfolio.
Yeah, of course. So the core kind of 4 founding owners of Ozone are Reach, Guardian, Telegraph, and News UK. So News UK being the Times and the Sun, they're the kind of 2 big titles, and then Reach being kind of the Daily Star, the Daily Mirror, and then a host of regional titles. Outside of that, we partner with Time Out, Bauer, Stylist, City AM. Who else is on there? My brain's gone blind. My brain's gone blank. But yeah, there's a number of other publishers in there. Essentially, what we're doing is we've got news kind of tied up
Yeah.
And what we're now doing is moving into more of the kind of lifestyle, the magazine titles of the world. And then CTAM is also joined to kind of bolster out that B2B focus as well.
Brilliant. That's great. So I think before we move into the fully fledged roasting, quick bit of housekeeping. The Q&A function on Zoom's open. So as we go through, obviously feel free to pop in any questions that crop up. And hopefully if we have time at the end, we can cover off a couple of those. If not, can pick it up offline after this session. So first things first, we'll kick off with one of the hottest topics in digital media this past year. That's privacy, specifically the changes that big ad tech has made these past 12 months to limit our ability to track and target people across both app and web environments. I think the first of those changes was back in spring when Apple updated to iOS 14.5 and restricted our ability to access the device ID on iOS devices to reach people in a more targeted way on Apple iPhones and iPads. Later this year, we're expecting a similar change and a similar development on the web when Google was scheduled to deprecate the use of third-party cookies on their Chrome browser. I'm sure most of the people on the call today will know that that change was delayed, and we now have an extended grace period to kind of come together as an industry, continue to work on finding those cookieless alternatives moving forward. So I suppose my question to you, Joel, is looking back in hindsight, how prepared were the Ozone Project for those changes if they had landed on schedule? And I suppose beyond that, how well suited will you be to handle those changes when they eventually do come in?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. I suppose it is an interesting time at the moment in digital. From our perspective, we were founded kind of to address some of those kind of core needs. And from our perspective, we're seeing a lot of agencies and brands kind of exploring and testing non-third-party cookie reliant offerings, whilst others are very much kind of still kind of relying on third-party cookies while they can. The delay itself kind of gives clients a little bit more breathing room, but I actually read an article last week which kind of highlighted that 53% of all impressions online already don't support third-party cookies. So the boat to a certain degree has already sailed. Safari, Mozilla already don't support it. So it's really just kind of Chrome that's kind of delaying things. So it's not really a new thing. From an insight, I mean, so yeah, so not really a new thing. I suppose from an insight and a conversion perspective, using third-party cookies is ultimately kind of tells half the story. And targeting, from a targeting perspective, addressability is greatly reduced. So brands and agencies should really be exploring third-party cookie alternatives rather than kind of waiting till the last minute. I suppose from a kind of where do we fit and how well are we suited to address these changes? From an Ozone perspective, we were founded post GDPR with the knowledge that these changes were coming. We do already have a number of alternative ways to create audiences and drive audience engagement opportunities outside of this. And our approach is very much structured around kind of three core components to help brands navigate this across measurement and targeting. So we see the need to reimagine measurement and not re-architect the past. We need to be respecting users, also consumers really, behind the data. And then the final piece is that does create a better experience not just for the brands, but for consumers, but ultimately for the brands themselves. So which is good for business. I mean, we are doing a lot of investment and testing measurement initiatives to kind of look at alternatives that don't support third-party cookies. And we have a number of products already in market. So custom audience targeting, the launch of our Ozone Outcomes product, cookieless frequency management, attention measures, and audience cohorts via our kind of Ozone marketplace offering. So which don't use any kind of IDs at all. I suppose from our perspective, it's very much business as usual. And we already run campaigns without the use of third-party cookies. So yeah, we're in a pretty good place.
Brilliant. And I think, yeah, that first point's massive, isn't it? This isn't a new thing, but when Chrome do come on board, we definitely can't put our heads in the sand for any longer. I think the latest stats are sort of 70% plus of users use the Chrome browser. So that is, controlling market share. I think the other point you mentioned about cookieless frequency management, super interesting. I think the widest perception is that cookies are mainly used for things like aggressive retargeting across the web. But we need to be conscious that cookies have played an integral role in that full process, from ad serving through to media buying and the eventual delivery of the creative. And at each step, we've got to find those cookieless alternatives to the tech we'd used before.
Yeah.
And yeah, I suppose, as you say, Ozone are probably in a privileged position, having been born out of GDPR, and yeah, are well placed to address those points.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So
yeah.
So I guess we've done one of the hot topics from the past year. Moving on to another, transparency. So looking back, kind of roughly 12 months ago, ISBA released their programmatic supply chain study, which is fair to say did rock the industry when it came out. Some of the stats on the unknown delta and the percentage of supply chains which were unmeasurable, from advertiser marketing budget through to that end publisher. Mm-hmm. Again, similar to third-party cookies, it wasn't a new thing. There was a general awareness in the market that there were still challenges to overcome with transparency in programmatic. But I think what that study did was it refocused the industry's attention on the issue, and it encouraged publishers, agencies, advertisers to realign on continuing to resolve those transparency issues moving forward. I suppose my question to you, Joel, is looking back over the past 12 months, what impact have you observed from that study coming out? Is it still something which is actively discussed with agency partners and advertisers?
Yeah, no, definitely it is. I suppose we're having really positive and interesting conversations with advertisers and agencies, as you'd expect, around kind of making positive changes on some of the kind of topics highlighted in the study. Ozone, I suppose, to be honest, was kind of founded to address a number of the topics highlighted in the study. So it's actually really promising to see these topics highlighted to such a degree across the industry. I suppose one example being that we see clients requesting more transparency around their programmatic activations, not just with us, but across the board with other partners, and making sure that their kind of campaigns are being delivered across sites that they know, they trust, and that ultimately are volumes that they're expecting to see, not across a kind of roster of 40,000 plus websites, which was one of the kind of points that was highlighted in the study itself. I suppose from our perspective, Ozone is kind of held up and often kind of spoken about as a way for advertisers and agencies to overcome some of the points highlighted in the study. And we've actually seen a lot of investment come off the back of that. So it's really promising to see that these points mentioned, people are coming to Ozone and having and opening up those conversations. I suppose it would be fair to say, though, that a lot of the kind of bigger picture and strategic views that were kind of mentioned in the study doesn't always kind of translate to kind of through to channel investment. So, which to be honest is a bit of a shame. I suppose end of the day, it's been highly influential to drive change and kind of create that awareness in the industry. But it still doesn't remain a significant talking point. Ultimately, it's a discussion really for brands and agencies to kind of have and ultimately kind of to drive that change. So it's good to see the points mentioned, but we need to all work together to drive that change. Yeah,
that makes sense. And I suppose as part of driving that change, we also need the perspective that parts of that supply chain definitely do add value. And
for sure,
I guess it's easy to forget that there is lots of ad tech required to manage that process, particularly of real-time bidding, but also more guaranteed deals. We do need an ad server, we do need a DSP often, and likewise the tech on the publisher side. But I guess part of that change is just being really, really honest about which piece of those tech add value and which can justify their continued role within client setup, essentially.
Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant. So I suppose, we touched on two big issues there. I guess putting those to one side and just like looking a bit more broadly at the past 12 months, what would you say the biggest challenge has been for the Ozone Project in the last year?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I suppose it's got to be really maintaining the fact that Ozone is here to complement the work of our publisher owners and partners. I suppose what we're not looking to do is be an alternative way to buy publisher inventory or we said this very much from the beginning that clients should always continue and to work with our publishers for kind of all the partnerships, editorial, sponsorships that they offer, and then kind of have Ozone as a wider awareness piece to complement that work, driving awareness across the portfolio. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I suppose as an agency, our perspective always is if we receive a brief which does over-index to a particular publisher, quite often it does make sense to consolidate budget with that standalone publisher. But we're now in a privileged position to do that and also extend our reach via the Ozone Project and your proposition.
Yeah,
which is obviously a great position to be in. I guess, yeah, so touched on the publisher portfolio. I think you mentioned the brands that are included as part of that. You obviously have a wide breadth of reach, but also increasingly that depth of reach where you cover different types of content, different audiences. And I guess from that kind of privileged position, it must be easy to kind of have your finger on the pulse of content consumption trends, what people are reading and engaging with across that portfolio of brands. I suppose looking back at what is fair to say has been a topsy-turvy sort of year and a half, are there any key content consumption trends you've observed which you think brands should be aware of?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we do a lot of work, as you would expect, to kind of highlight some of the insights that we have access to. And I suppose if you think about the kind of publishers that the Ozone is owned by and that we have access to, one of the kind of overarching trends during the pandemic was that our publishers actually received kind of record levels of audience engagement. I mean, at one point at the beginning of lockdown, it was up 43% week on week. So people do turn to trusted editorial for news and content. And as I said, that's not just driven by news. It's also driven by kind of entertainment categories, sports, food and drink, and home and garden was another one. So we saw a lot of content around DIY being engaged with. And we all heard about how kind of banana bread kind of took over the UK at the beginning of lockdown. I suppose, as I said, yeah, we saw that not just from a kind of entertainment, but at the beginning, but also information at the beginning of lockdown. And ultimately, our content is kind of driven by publishers and readership demand. And then this then actually becomes a really unique and insight view on how the UK consumes content. And that then fuels our insight platform. So all the data comes in, we kind of slice and dice it around a big taxonomy, and then we can understand how the nation consumes content. And this is actually a unique way for us to kind of provide insight. And that's actually why we launched something called Reading the Nation, which is a weekly Monday morning email that goes out to all of our partners on those trends that we've seen from the week before. I suppose if you think back over the past couple of months, we've actually also been able to directly correlate interest in travel, along with kind of peaks in traffic engagement around different content types, dependent on the government's lifting, imposing of restrictions. And then I suppose the final piece is kind of following this fantastic kind of sport of summer that we've had. And we can see content spikes in the lead up to, during, and then kind of following events such as the Euros, Wimbledon, and the Olympics. So it's an important piece. And what we like to do with brands is kind of expose those insights and then kind of build out strategies around how they can engage those audiences with campaigns.
Yeah. And I suppose that last step's really important, isn't it? You're taking it from an insight into kind of an actionable media buy. And I suppose there are plenty of opportunities to kind of extrapolate from content consumption to users being in market for things, even to the extent of an uplift in travel consumption. Suddenly travel insurance is also something you can funnel in their direction. Likewise with increasing people learning to drive, again, ladders up into those big major car brands and also the financial industry, which supports getting people onto the road. I would say as well that the Reading the Nation, which Joel mentioned, is a great resource. It lands in my inbox each week. And what we'll do is we'll make sure we send a link around so how people can sign up to that, because it's definitely the kind of resource which takes you out of the day-to-day of media planning, your individual brand's timeline, and makes you look a bit wider to what I guess the nation as a whole is consuming, and some of those overarching trends you can kind of align your brand or your marketing comms to. I guess the other thing I'd mention as well, off the back of what Joel said, I'm guessing some of those trends you mentioned, the Olympics, the Euros, we know there's a buzz around those events, but I suppose from your position, because you're across a wider range of publishers, do you find that it's easier to identify those smaller trends which are kind of bubbling below the surface? You've been able to look over a wider range.
Yeah, so we were looking at something last week around sport content, and roller skating or rollerblading popped up as something that was quite high engagement. But I suppose it's not a big audience for Ozone, but it's a really highly engaged audience. So they're the kind of trends that we can kind of spot and then pull out from the data. So we can go anywhere with it. And I suppose what one thing is, it's not just about the insight, it's about how we can kind of tailor that into a story for the client, and how we can tap creative or tie into certain events or kind of products for clients.
Makes sense. And yeah, just at this point, conscious we're sort of 10 minutes from the end of the session, definitely feel free to send those questions through if you want more detail on anything we've discussed so far. I think we're coming up to the last main question of the roasting itself. And I think it's probably the third of the major topics which has come up in the past year, and has definitely been one of the major buzzwords which has emerged within digital media, but arguably also kind of media as a whole. And that's attention, and more widely kind of the attention economy. Attention as a metric has definitely emerged as a new way of measuring and making digital media accountable for the impact it has on the end user, and kind of takes us a step beyond kind of some of the more, let's say, technical metrics like viewability, and gives us a more robust way of measuring if people are actually concentrating on the ads that are popping up on the sites and apps they're browsing through. And I guess I know the Ozone Project definitely play in this space. It'd be great, Joel, if you could just discuss and cover off what role you think those attention metrics are going to have in media buying in the future.
Yeah, so we see it as a really positive step and a significant move for the industry. I mean, Ozone already bill ourselves as a high attention advertising platform, simply due to the engagement that our publishers see and receive weekly, monthly, and daily even. I suppose the notion of attention measurement kind of shines a light on the fact that not all impressions are ultimately even. And we do a lot of kind of independent research, and one of our partners, Lumen, has shown that ads on our environments like Ozone actually drive up to 49% more attention than the rest of the web. So one thing at the Ozone that we're doing is to kind of build on that. Is we've recently launched our attention index, which is a proprietary measurement tool that we report on all PCAs kind of moving forward, alongside, as you mentioned, kind of the KPIs that we talk about, so viewability and CTR. We actually wrote a white paper on this very topic, so we can share that with the wider team, the wider people on the call as a follow-up. It's an interesting read to kind of showcase where we're going. I suppose the final thing is we see it as a very important and first step in helping clients understand how much attention their ads are getting. And we compare it to our benchmark data, and what it's made up of is kind of 6 weighted measures that we can that are highlighted in the white paper. We're also working with Lumen to do a bit more of a deep dive at the moment into kind of understanding why premium environments do drive greater attention for brands, and that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work in it.
Brilliant. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I definitely think the onus is on us as agencies, and I suppose you guys as media owners, to stay on top of that research, because I think the reality is some of the top line numbers of attention assigned to each of those channels don't necessarily paint a particularly rosy picture for the impact the channel delivers. But if you go a level below and start making distinctions between premium inventory, less premium inventory, certain ad formats and others, there can be quite a big divergence in the attention those get. And I think that stat you had for the Ozone premium supply kind of tells that story, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. We did actually just get a question through on the attention topic. I know, Joel, you mentioned the white paper, and that it goes into a bit more detail on some of those attention metrics. I know you probably don't have time to go through all of them, but are there a couple that you're able to pull out, which I guess go beyond kind of the CTR and viewability?
Yeah, so we partner with Moat, and we look at some of their metrics. So we look at kind of dwell time, time in view, page real estate. So that's kind of one point. We also then, as I say, we look at kind of viewability and those kind of wider topics. We also then look at kind of brand studies, and then how that fuels in, and then what kind of awareness and consideration campaigns generate off the back of the campaigns that we run. So we take, as I said, there's about 6 different data points that we do look at. We roll them up into what we call the attention score, and then that's kind of the background of it, and then each campaign gets that in the PCA.
Amazing. Okay, right, I'm going to look at the Q&A section and see if we've got anything else through. I think we've got 2 or 3 minutes to just cover off maybe one question, and then we can follow up separately with the others. Okay, so I guess we've touched on some related areas, but looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for the Ozone Project in the next 6 months?
Yeah, I suppose as the world kind of comes back to some kind of normality, we have an opportunity to kind of place brands in environments that are highly engaged and that are scaled, really, and that it's easy to activate across. I suppose that the points that I mentioned in the ISBA and the PwC report, especially with the kind of third-party cookie demise and then kind of privacy changes, actually kind of accentuate this. I suppose the opportunity that we have here is that we do have a very clear roadmap on, and ultimately what we're looking to achieve and what we're delivering for advertisers. We've got a number of kind of developments around self-serve offerings that are coming soon, that do run alongside our kind of managed service deals, and then our marketplace offering. So there's a number of new products that we've actually launched to market.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like there's lots of new tech coming up, and I'm sure you can't give that exact roadmap on everything, but I think, if people are signed up to things like the Reading the Nation newsletter, I'm sure there's opportunities to keep in touch with what the Ozone Project are doing and the rollout of those various products. I know the attention index in particular, I'm keen to see how that lives alongside media plans and PCAs moving forward.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I think that's everything for the session. Thanks everyone for joining, particularly thanks Joel for joining from the Ozone side.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have the platform to find out a bit more about the proposition, and maybe hopefully introduce you guys to some new advertisers and brands who hadn't considered activating across that premium supply in the UK.
Yeah.
And as we say, what we'll do is, in a follow-up note, we'll send through some details on how to sign up for Reading the Nation. And I think, Joel, you mentioned those white papers as well. We can send through some links to that.
Yeah, we'd love to get that into the hands of some of the people on the call. Yeah, it's very insightful. Not just it's quite interesting to kind of showcase what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we're addressing the future. And then obviously, the attention stuff as well.
Brilliant. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, for joining the call.
Brilliant.
Enjoy the rest of your Thursdays.